Well, hey there, you're on the internet, I have some free time, and welcome to the Triple N Network, where all you newbie nib nerds can find all the news you'll need. Let's look at an ink today, shall we? Now, if you watch all of my videos, no, you're not going crazy. Those are the exact same pens from the test I did yesterday. That just happened to be a coincidence. A weird one, but a coincidence. So, yeah, today's ink I have in sample form, and it's by Diamine. Royal Blue. Which is interesting, because it's more like a medium blue. Usually when I think of royal blue, I think of something a little darker, something a little more like this. But, yeah, I actually found myself really liking this blue. I do like a medium blue. And unfortunately, I don't have a swatch of it, but it kind of reminds me of Lavender's Skies of Blue. How many times am I going to say blue today? I don't know. But, yeah, so, anyways, let's get into the test, or rest of the review. What am I saying? I don't know. So, two pens I used were these. This is a Pilot Metropolitan with a Japanese fine nib. I am not used to writing with these nibs. It's like trying to write with the corner of a razor blade. I'm still learning. It's not perfect. We'll get into it. Now, I also used this pen, which is a JinHao X450. I love my X450s because they tend to be pretty broad and pretty wet, and this one is. Alright. Speaking of swatches, so here's Diamine's Royal Blue, very nice solid medium blue. And here's Private Reserve's Lake Placid Blue. Very, very similar. I'd say maybe this one is just, in the darker areas, is just the tiniest little bit hint more like periwinkle. Here's Noodler's, it's their Fast Dry Blue, Bernanke Blue. Very similar, maybe a little bit darker, but very similar. Diatramentis Robert Louis Stevenson. Again, quite similar, maybe a little darker, definitely hints more towards periwinkle in a few of the areas to the side. And lastly, Sailor's Gentle Soughton, which is actually fairly similar, but this one is maybe a little bit brighter. This one, teeniest bit, leans more towards the purple. This one, I'd say, teeniest bit leans more towards like a sky blue, or, you know, like almost like a turquoise, but yeah. So there's that. Alright, chromatography. Now here's the chromatography as it's meant to be done, where you put the line of ink and instantly drop it in the water. And you can definitely tell where that line of ink was. It's a very distinct kind of purple, right? Then you get sort of a soft lavendery purple, and then you go into an almost turquoise up at the top. Now here's where I let it dry, which is not how you're supposed to do it, but I'd do it anyway. Dot maybe got a little bit darker. That's really the only difference. And again, sort of a hazy lavender, turquoise at the top. Now, I wanted to see what this ink could sort of stand up against, so I did a couple tests. Now here's water, and water really broke it up. It's a Diamine ink. Diamine's actually known for being quite easy to clean for the most part, and certainly is. Water did just fine. Now, 1/3 bleach solution, for the most part, made it look like nothing had ever been there, which is kind of amusing. Ammonia pen flush really got it moving. However, since it is, you know, it's a chemical, it's ammonia, it started to like mess with the paper, and I sort of sopped it up quickly. Hydrogen peroxide got it moving as well, but I don't know. Water kind of did the best, unless you want to erase it from existence. Alright, paper test, top down in density, Clairefontaine, 90 grams per square meter. Yeah, it's just a really nice sort of medium shade of blue. However, there are some environmental factors. This was sort of the edge of the page of paper, so as you'll see, just sort of right here mostly, get a little bit of feathering, but that's pretty much it. Here I don't even think that was feathering, I think that was just me writing poorly. Look at the J, it's all wonky. Now, well, maybe, meh, but anyways. Very well behaved, decent saturation, it never really looks undersaturated. The Japanese fine took 12 seconds to dry. The brown wet JinHao took 19. Here I say there are weird patches of sheen. However, I can't find them. I can't find any sheen here, like, at all. So I don't know what I was talking about. But the flow was slightly wet, as you might be able to tell from just the sheer size of that smear. But it's very well behaved in that there's no bleeding, no feathering, no spread, no echo, no sheen. There's no sheen. I see no sheen. But yeah, not a ton of shading, or I mean there is, but it's like a soft shading. It's not like a super distinct kind of shading. But yeah, yeah, not a lot of water resistance. Those dots from the JinHao are pretty clear. The writing is really, really gone. Next up is Fabriano EcoQua. It's an 85 gram per square meter paper. I really like it. It tends to be able to handle inks that other papers like Rhodia and Clairefontaine struggle with. Here, not so much of a problem. The Japanese fine took 13 seconds. The raw and wet JinHao took 21. Here we get a little bit more of a halo effect around the wettest areas. Like you see how there's like a distinct little outline around that darker bit in the middle of that bottom scrubby. That's what I mean by a halo. It's almost like there's a darker outline around things. And I actually really like that in writing. So it's kind of nice to see it all throughout here. This ink is very well behaved. There's no bleed, no feather, no spread, no echo, no sheen. All good in that regard. Not the best water resistance. Now that Japanese fine is really, really gone. In fact, the camera's darkening it up just a little bit. Again, the dots are pretty easy to see where they were. The JinHao put down more ink, and so there's going to be more to remain. So yeah, we did dye the page. So something to be aware of. Next up is Rhodia, 80 grams per square meter. Again, very solid medium blue. Looking pretty good. The Japanese fine took 12 seconds to dry. Broad and wet JinHao took 19. And again, we get a little bit of a halo effect. It's not as noticeable on here. We still do get a little bit of it. Nice shading. Yeah, you know, it's well behaved. There's no bleed, no feather, no spread, no echo, no sheen. All good in that regard. And again, not the best water test. It's, come on, camera. Again, the camera's darkening it up a bit. That Japanese fine is really, really gone. You can only see the barest hint of what was there. The X450, you can see a little bit of something, but it is very light, very hazy. It did dye the paper a little bit. Those dots are pretty clear, though. Next up is Tomoe River paper, which is known for drawing out shading and sheen and dry times, and it kind of did. So that Japanese fine took 15 seconds to dry. Not a huge leap there. But the broad and wet JinHao took 29. That is a bit of a leap, but then you see the sheer size of that smear and you kind of get an idea of what's going on. Here, I wanted to capture more of that sheen that we saw on, apparently that I saw before on the Clairefontaine, but here I really don't see any. I really don't see any sheen on here either. And so I kept laying it on and laying it on and laying it on in the scrubbies, and so we do get this, but where you can almost see it, but I feel like that's human error. That was just me really trying to show something that wasn't going to show up. Now here we do get a nice halo effect around the wettest parts. We do get it in the writing as well. It's just a little harder to show. But yeah, I mean, very well behaved. No bleed, no feather, no spread. There is, I'd say, some echo, probably more with the X450, just because it is a broader nib, and it's putting down more ink, so it's going to be a little bit darker, and this paper is just so thin. Now, what's curious is this paper loves to let ink slide away when you add more water, and here it kind of didn't. It didn't dye the page a lot, but it did a little, and yet if you look at what's at the very center, it's pretty clear. And you know, I mean, it's a lot lighter. It would not be the easiest thing in the world to read, but it's there. Now for the next 3 tests, I just used that Japanese fine, except to write the name. Now here is the world's worst 20-pound copier paper. And let's just compare line width. So here's that Japanese fine on Tomoe River where there was no spread. Here, yeah, we're getting spread. It's more like a Western fine. Maybe no, Western fine. Yeah, it gets woolly. There's no more shading, but it absorbed almost instantly. There is feathering. And a lot of woolliness, you know, like that texture. It's got like a texture to it. It's not great. But this is the world's worst 20-pound copier paper. I mean, you probably have something at least a step up from this, if not several steps up from this. This was not encouraging, though. There were several like little dots, and they were kind of all throughout where they nearly came through. It's not really what you want to see. That was human error, and that was the X450. That was me. But yeah, Now, this is interesting. This is kind of like what we saw in the chromatography with the purple down at the bottom and the blue coming off. That's kind of what we see in these water tests. The stuff at the center is much more of a purple, and that blue is going off of it. It almost looks like, I don't know, like a propane flame or something, but yeah. Now, it is kind of a mess because that blue is coming off, but, I mean, the stuff at the center is very clear, very there. It's not feathering, not exploding, not turning into cactus monsters. If you had to recover that, I think you could. Next up is Mead Notebook Paper, and this is the kind of Mead paper you'd find in like a composition book or a lab book, not necessarily the kind that you'd find in like a 5-star, like, you know, ring notebook, spiral notebook. So this stuff actually has more of a texture, almost like newspaper. So we are getting a pretty intense, like, woolliness. Like, we're getting that woolly texture, and I don't know if you'd call this feathering or if it's just very intense woolliness, because that's something that this kind of paper will do. Now, it took 1 second to dry. We don't get any shading. We get a couple of spots that almost come through, and that's not great, but it could be a lot worse. Honestly, this paper is just so thin, because it's thinner than 20-pound copier paper. I wouldn't be shocked if a lot of that show through is just from how thin the paper is. Now, this water test is actually pretty great. A lot of times this paper will freak out when you add water. Here, not so much. It did dye the page, but it didn't feather, it didn't explode. If you had to recover that, you could. It didn't even get a whole lot lighter. Now, lastly is Moleskine paper, which is expensive, yet cheap. And, yeah, so let's bring it into the scrubby. You can see the pulp of the paper. You can see that texture. And, I mean, ugh, that looks nasty, right? I mean, there's feathering, 3 seconds to dry, no shading. It doesn't look good. And this is a Japanese fine. It's not, so it's a very fine nib. It's not wet or dry. I'd say it's, you know, right in the middle. It's fairly moderate. So it's not like pouring out ink, and yet we get this. Now, if you were watching my review from yesterday of KWZ Iron Gall Mandarin, But anyways, it's not good. It's not good. But, however, this paper does tend to do really weird things when you add water. And here, it's kind of weird in that the stuff at the center kind of started to freak out a little bit. And that the blue didn't really want to wash away. But, however, if you had to recover that, you probably could. So that's good. So, there you go for your consideration from the Triple N Network. Diamine's Royal Blue. I'm not sure I'd consider it a royal blue, but that could be a personal misconception. It's actually a very nice medium blue, kind of a sky blue, but not like a turquoise sky blue. Yeah, it's actually pretty nice. Not a ton of shading, very well behaved. You're not going to get a ton of sheen, but it's actually a very nice medium blue. So, there you go, for your consideration from the Triple N Network. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe to the channel. And thanks for watching. Bye.